Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for episode 36 of Save You a Seat. And today we are going to talk about SoftPro Banking, which we are very excited. It is actually a new product. And we have two of our experts at SoftPro, which I'll introduce here in a second, that are going to take you through it. Just a couple housekeeping items. As usual, if you have any questions, there is a question feature in your box. I don't know if it's on your top left, right, wherever it is on your screen, but there's something called questions. You can click on that and you can type in any questions. If we're able to get to them throughout the presentation, we will, but if we don't, we will definitely reach out to you afterwards and make sure you get all your questions answered. As a reminder, we do record these and we send a follow-up email with some information as well as a link to the recording. So you will receive that at some point this week after the presentation. And if you ever really want to go back and view any of them, you can find most of them on our SoftPro blog, which is on our website. You can also sign up for notifications from there. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn this over because I am excited to see this as well. It's somewhat new to me. I've seen it a little bit. It's pretty cool. I think you guys are going to like it. And again, any questions you have, please go ahead and type them in there. And I will just mention, since this is a new product, if you are interested in it or you just want more information or a more in-depth demo, you can always reach out to your sales rep and they will go ahead and give you whatever information, or just reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with whomever you need to. So with that, I'd like to introduce who we have today. We have Elliott Potts, who's going to be kind of driving the show here when I turn it over, and he is a development manager at SoftPro. And along with Elliott, we have David Proctor, who's a senior technical sales manager. Many of you that maybe have ever used 360 may have spoken with David or seen him at some of our shows as well. So with that, I am going to turn it over to you, Elliott, and thank you again so much for joining us today.
All right, thank you very much, Leslie. Good morning, everyone. I appreciate you taking the time and looking forward to showing this to you. So as Leslie mentioned, this is a new product for us, SoftPro Banking. Our goal is to be able to provide you with the ability to view those wires that have been received into your trust account, and then being able to receipt them into your orders. And then when you're ready to disperse, you've collected all those funds and are ready to disperse your file, being able to post, approve, and submit that wire for payment through your bank platform. So for our integrated banks, being able to complete all of that work all within SoftPro Select. Don't have to leave and go to your bank portal and see what money's been received, or go and rekey information that might be already in Select, rekey it into your bank platform when you're actually ready to disperse those funds. So trying to give you the ability to do that all within Select, save you some keystrokes, provide you some additional functionality for searching that will certainly hopefully make it easier for you in doing so. Once this is installed, the way that it gets added is there's an install piece that goes on the client side, and then there's a server component as well, so that we can handle all of that communication between the bank and SoftPro Select directly between your network and theirs. So there's no routing through SoftPro's servers or anything like that. It's all direct from your network to your banks. Once it's installed, we have the ability to permission separately for those users that have access to the incoming side as well as the outgoing. So if you have users that are only concerned with viewing what wires have been received in your trust account, want to be able to receipt them into your orders, you can provide that. If you separately have users that they're only concerned with the disbursement side, you can control that separately too. So we do have those two separate pieces added. On the incoming side, once we click the incoming side, we have this new screen that we've built out. What we're doing here is providing you with the ability to search for what wires have been received into your trust account. So we're in the background, what we're doing is for those integrated banks that we have, we're reaching out and we're pulling that information from the bank. And we then associate it based upon the account number that's set up in SP admin for that trust account. And then we're saying, okay, based upon, my user, the profile that I'm currently in, and what trust accounts I have access to, that's what you can search by here. If you had multiple trust accounts assigned to that profile, you can search by multiple trust accounts. You can search by the date received, so that would be the date that that wire came in, the dollar amount of the wire, the Fed reference number, what bank it originated from, the ledger ID, that's if it had already been, linked and posted, and the details text. And this would be any of that additional information. So that OBI information would be in the details text, so you can search by that. The status of linked or unlinked means that those are the wires. Unlinked wire is one that has not been linked and posted to a existing ledger yet. So I click search and I see that, these are all the order or all the wires that have not been receipted into an order just yet. So you could use this as kind of your queue of what wires, instead of having to coordinate and say, which wire are you working on, which wire are you working on? You can look at it and say, oh, I know that we have this many wires, and this is, some of our test data. So I put a lot in here, but you can see that, you could use this kind of as a way to really plan out your work of these are the number of wires that we have left to process. When you have a wire that you want to look at and view, you see you have the receive date, you have a order ledger that it's assigned to, and we don't have one yet because it hasn't been done. And then we have the trust account that those funds came into, the dollar amount of the wire, the bank that it came from, the Fed reference number, and then that status that I referenced. And then any information about the OBI information, that would actually be displayable or viewable here by clicking on this link. You can search by it. As I mentioned in the details text, that's all the information that would be in here that you could search by. This is, again, just kind of some dummy information, but this would be, your OBI information. So if the company that was, or the party that was sending you the wire, if they had actually put in like the property address or, the actual order number, then that information you could view within here. Once you have a wire that you want to actually receipt and post into one of your existing orders, then you can do it one of two ways. You can single click on it to highlight it and make it blue like I did here, and then click link in the bottom right hand corner, or you can double click on it and that will open up this link incoming wire screen. In here, we're showing you the details of the wire, so what information we're showing in the grid, as well as the wire details shown down here as well. The middle portion is saying, okay, based upon this wire, how do we want to search for that wire in Select? We have a number of ways to do that. As you see, we can search by the ledger ID, the payor, the transaction type, and that can be the receipt or incoming wire. If you leave it empty, then it's going to search by both. You can search by the ledger type, the status of pending or posted, and then by the dollar amount. Immediately upon opening this screen, we defaulted 3 pieces of information. So we put in the ledger type of being an order, looking for status of a pending transaction, and the transaction dollar amount being exactly to our amount of our wire that we received. And then we display those results for you. This is just to try and help quickly get you started. If you didn't have any matches here, then you could change any of this information and search that. So in this instance though, I see down below, I have one matching record. In here, I can see that the ledger that it belongs to, the transaction type is a receipt, and the status of pending. And then we can see that we're expecting those funds from Matt and Bob buyers. And then we have the dollar amount. If I wanted to, click this link and view the ledger here, we can confirm or use that information to confirm that what we have here in our details matches. And so if we look at this and say, yes, it looks like these funds do belong to this, or this wire does belong to this order or this ledger, then I can go ahead and click the link and post the ledgers. What that's going to do is it's going to change this from a receipt to a incoming wire transaction. It's going to post that transaction. It's going to return me back to our incoming wire screen, and it's going to remove that wire so that now, as I was mentioning, you could use this as a queue of work because now that one is not there. So I know that, I've already posted that one. And so, I don't need to remember that later when I'm looking at this, oh yeah, I already posted that one, so I don't need to worry about it. If we went into our order and looked at it, we also record any details that we receive with that wire into that transaction. So when I go into the register, I can bring up that transaction and I can look and I can see that any of that information that we receive from the bank that we're integrated with, we record into this. So we record, the contact that it came from, the bank name, the routing number, the bank sequence number that they record with it, and that Fed reference number. Okay. We also record into the extended memo any of those additional details, that OBI information we write into the extended memo so that it's saved with the transaction. So if there's ever questions on it, you have that information directly saved into your, directly saved with the transaction here. Some customers have decided to print this transaction form and then save it to the order attachments so that they can retain that information. So that is a way that you certainly could do that. Okay. So that's for the scenario when you had one where it exactly matched. Now I'll walk through one where it doesn't exactly match. So I'll take this next wire here for 58,000. And again, I can click on it and then click the link, or I can double click on the line. I'll go through the link this time. And in this instance, we don't have any transactions. So we did our search that we defaulted in, the ledger is an order, the status transaction type is pending, and then trying to search for exactly to the penny of that wire. In this instance, we did not have any. So I can click on the clear and I can search by an order number or a ledger number. We search by both to try and help you find that. So in this case, I know that I think that this probably went with this order. So I'm going to search for this. And I see that I have 2 pending receipts here. In this instance, again, we can click on the link for the ledger, but we can see all the information that we need to about those pending items. We can see where the money's coming from. So if we saw these funds and saw it as, additional funds coming from our buyer, then we again can do the link and post. Once we do that, it's going to again change this from a pending receipt to a posted incoming wire. It's going to change the transaction dollar amount from the 119,000 to the 58,753.32 because that's the dollar amount of our wire, and it's going to post that for us. If we're using the Select Proform generated transactions, then Select will automatically create another pending receipt for the remainder difference between what we were still expecting from our buyer and what we actually received. So again, if we go back into that same order, we can go ahead and see that. We've receipted in the additional 58,000. We're still looking for the additional 60,000. If there were any changes to earnest money, as an example, so if you needed to record this as earnest money or need to send it to a line, then you would come into the register and you would make that change from here. So you could change it to the 58,000 and apply it to a line if you needed to, or if you were sending it to earnest money. Okay. All right. So with the incoming side, hopefully that provides some ease of use and makes it certainly easier for you.
Hey, Elliott.
Yes.
We have quite a few questions, so I think it might be easier if I asked you some of them now, if you don't mind.
Sounds great. Yep.
Okay, sure. So somebody said, can you post an incoming wire to 2 expected receipts? For example, if a lender sends their funds along with buyer funds?
So it would only be receipted in for the single total funds. If you needed to split that, you would either want to do that into a transfer ledger and then split it from there, or make a change to that once it's within the ledger itself.
Okay. Someone else says to have proof of the incoming wire. Printing the posted receipt seems less official somehow, but perhaps it's because we're doing things now. That's the only way, right? Is printing out that proof
That
that
is, so
okay.
the banks, none of the banks that we have worked with thus far have the ability to have any sort of a document that we can download with that.
Gotcha.
We just get the data, so we don't have, you know, like an official receipt document. Now, if they're already emailing you a form, you could certainly save that to your order attachments in addition to that, but there's not a form or a receipt that we get from them.
Okay. Could the transaction form generation be generated automatically in any way? Is this like a report that you can set up to run automatically, or does someone have to go in and do it?
So there are different ways that people have done it. Some have created a ready doc that that becomes part of their closing process as they generate that. And so with the closing, they create that for all their transactions. Others print it one at a time, so it's kind of up to them, but there's not an automated way to do that.
Gotcha. Okay. And another question was said, this is what you're showing here. They're only looking for receipts that are expected to be a wire, right? Not anything that might be marked as like buyer bringing in funds or check or anything like that.
That's correct. It's only for those wires that are received in your trust account, or you know, a book transfer. So if it was interbank transfer of funds, then in that instance, that would show as well. So.
Okay. And then the same person says, can you look for receipts that are in more than one status? Meaning, if a receipt has been marked as posted or pending, or
Yes. So if you were looking for a receipt of any status, then you could actually do that as well. So you could change the status to none or empty here, and then that would search for all those statuses as well. But right now we have, you know, pending, posted, voided, held, stop payment, in transit, because those are all of the potential statuses for those transactions.
okay. And then this is the last one, and I'm going to let you move on here. It just says, is there ever an issue matching the payor code?
So the matching in the payor code, so we're using the existing transaction. So when I search for one of these, actually I'll just use my one I was just setting up. On this, take out the dollar amount so we can search by it. So in here, we're using the pending transactions that are already set up within the order. So that payor code has already been established within this. Or if it was a manually generated one, then there potentially is not a payor code. So in that case, there just would not be a payor code. So, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to click off that. So we're using that pending transaction. So whatever payor code already exists with that, that's what we would be using.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. All right. And I'm sure some of the questions that people are thinking about are what banks. And so we have First American Trust, we have City National, and working on Fifth Third Bank now, and then, you know, looking to add Bank United later this year. So.
And Elliott, just to add to that, if those on the line, you know, if you are interested in, you know, having us reach out, we're in conversations with many other banks, you know, working up agreements with some. And, you know, if you have any questions concerning, you know, the availability of this platform for your bank, you know, you can reach out to myself at david.proctor@softprocorp.com. Or you can obviously reach out to your sales rep. They'll forward it to my attention and we'll run that down.
Okay. All right, thank you, David. All right, so switching gears a little bit and moving into outgoing. So I just, while David was talking, I clicked on the tab for SP Banking and then looking at outgoing. So outgoing really starts when a transaction is posted within the register. So we have the ability to add and extend the workflow so that you can have that multi-level approval that you want to have before you submit that to the bank. It can all start with the order contact. So at the order contact, you have the ability to enter in once it's received from the like a payoff demand, or receive back the wiring instructions that you received from the seller. All of that can be entered into the outgoing wire information with each of your contacts. That might not be something that you're using today because it's not integrated, and that data is not really going anywhere. But this information can help seed what you see and is available within the register. So in the register, Select automatically says when this payee code is P2 or whatever it might be, it's going to look at that contact and say, okay, do they have any information entered with their contact? Great, then I'll just copy and insert that here. So this information, once a wire is posted, is what we use to then transfer that wire to the bank and instruct them on this is the party to pay the funds to. So it can help make the process easier if you receive it, enter it earlier, and then being able to pass that through. Okay.
L-E spelled I-E.
All right, so on, I'm going to, the other thing, one other thing that you can do too to save a couple of clicks is that on each contact, if you know you're going to be wiring them funds, you can set it up to anticipate disbursement as an outgoing wire as well. And that just saves from when you're going into the register, from changing the pending transaction type from a check to an outgoing wire. Since check is default, we can just change it. So I'm going to change this one as well, and then we'll post these remaining items. So we're going to, there we go. All right, so now I'm going to post these last two items. And once we do that, I'm going to go ahead and jump back to our outgoing wires. So in our outgoing wire screen, it's very similar to the incoming side. It's saying, based upon our search criteria, so we can search by the trust account, the modification date, the order or ledger ID, and then the dollar amount, what wires do we want to look at? So I'm going to look at all of my wires that have been modified or taken action on them today. In our search results, we have the details link. The details shows us the transaction as it was posted in the register. This is a read-only mode or view of that transaction. We can see all the information that was entered for the bank details. We can see the history of it, and then the wire history we can see as well. Okay, and the wire history I'll come back to in just a bit. We have a link to the order or ledger so that we could open the order if we needed to. We can confirm any information, make sure that we're ready to disperse on it, or go and look at the order attachments and maybe look at that wire instruction that we received. Okay. We see the trust account, the dollar amount of the wire, and then the party that's being paid. The name column is actually the party that posted it. We actually just recently are working on changing that to posted party instead of just name, and then the transaction date, reference number, and then our wire status. Our wire status being pending approval means that the wire has been posted but has not been approved yet by enough parties for us to be at an approved status so that then we can submit it. The way that we control this is that within SP admin, we have the ability to configure that. So for each integrated bank that we have, you would have a separate configuration for the connector. So the connector is just what we're calling the piece that actually handles the transfer of data between Select and your bank. Okay, but the way that the functionality of it is all the same. So within it, just briefly so you can see it, you have the ability to set what trust accounts it would be on. You have settings saying, how we're going to communicate with that bank. And then the approvers are actually those users or groups of users that can approve a wire before it's sent to the bank. So we can have a group of users or individual users. And then we also have approval limits. So based upon the dollar amount, how many parties need to approve a wire before it can be sent to the bank? In this instance, I have up to $1 million requires one approver. Anything over $1 million up to 10 million requires 2 parties to approve it before we can send it to the bank. And these approvers have to be different people than the party that posted it as well. So in this case, I have these 3 that were posted by Emily. So I have the action of being able to approve, reject, or ignore. This one that was just posted by myself, I do not have the action to approve. So it requires not only somebody to take the action of approving that wire, it takes a different person than the party that posted it to approve that wire. Okay. So if Emily has entered everything in correctly and it looks good and I want to approve this wire, then I can take the action and approve the wire. If I were to take the action and reject the wire, it would actually void this wire and it would need to be corrected if there was a typo or something was incorrect in that. Or if I was going to ignore the wire, then that would be more of a rare occurrence where, this is just one that we're not going to handle through the integration. And the ignore action is actually something you can permission as well. So if you don't want all users to be able to take that action, you can permission that as well. You can take action on multiple wires at one time. So I'm going to do that here. I'm going to approve all 3 of these wires. And then once we save, we save and make our changes, it goes through and it calculates, okay, based upon the dollar amount of this wire, we have 1 approval. Does that meet our requirements? It does. So now our wire status is approved. So this is so that we can go ahead and work up the files ahead of time. And when we're ready to release those funds, we can submit our approved wires. So now I'm going to take the action of submit and submit that wire. At this point in time, we would be essentially in the background, it's a queue that the next time that we send information to the bank, we're going to take all those wires that have a status of submitted and we're going to ship those off to the bank. We then start getting updates back from the bank, and it depends upon which bank we're working with on how frequently we can get those. Sometimes it's within a minute or 2. Sometimes it can be 5 to 10 minutes, just depending upon how frequently they can prepare that information and provide it back to us. The first that they all do, they all tell us that, yep, we received that wire, it's been accepted. We can then sometimes see bank in progress, but most often we see bank accepted and then it will jump right to its final status. So the final status is bank completed. And once we get to that point, so I'm just hitting search to refresh my search results. And this is a test one. So once it runs again, we should see bank completed. There we go. So in our bank completed, once we get to this status, it means that the wire has gone fully through the Fed system and we've received back that Fed reference number, and we actually update the transaction with that Fed reference number. So we write it back into that transaction. In the wire history that I mentioned earlier, we can see everything that happened. So we can see the user that posted it, who approved it, and additionally, the party that submitted it, along with our bank accepted and bank completed. So seeing what bank integration updated those transactions after. So all of that information gets recorded back, and you can view it here. If there was an error or anything like that in transmission, or the bank rejected it, then we can see that in the wire status here. For FA Trust and City National, that's what we would see here. You could actually see that, and you could click on it and you could see what message that they sent back. We also do some early validation to ensure that when the wire is posted that it meets the requirements of the bank that we're sending it to, so that the user posting it can get some of that early validation, you know, that the account number is the right length, the routing number is the right length, things like that. It has the minimum required data in order for us to actually be able to send that wire to the bank. So all on an effort to make it easier for you, you know, save you some keystrokes from having to rekey all that information, and then, you know, obviously as well, not having to log into your bank platform, and saving you some time there. So with that, I'll pause and see if we've got any questions at this point, Leslie.
Yes, someone said, can we limit the second level approver to specific users?
So you can. So you have the ability to say who those specific users are by assigning them in here. You can say, you know, those specific users or groups of users. You can provide that in here.
Okay. And someone else says, what does it look like if a secondary person's approval is needed?
So if it would stay in this pending approval, it would stay in that pending approval status. It would calculate through and it would say, okay, based upon this, you know, we saw, like in this one here where I've approved it, it would actually stay in a pending approval until a second person had taken the action to approve that wire.
Okay.
And again, you can see all of that through the details. You could see who posted it and who had approved it to that point.
All right, someone else asked here, it says, is there any validation on the account ownership at the receiving bank?
There's not an account owner validation at the receiving bank. If banks, you know, had that service, that's something that we could look to tie in to that. But in the wire product, there is not that validation.
All right, it says, review process allows to verify wire instruction details. If a correction is required, do we have to reject, or can the approver make the change?
So the approver can make the change, but what we do is we ensure that the wire, as it was posted and then approved, before we submit it, we go through and we say, okay, is this wire in the same state that it was when it was posted or last modified, and then approved in the same manner? If that is true, then we can send it. So if you made a change to it, so say that you approved it and then you said, oh no, there's a typo in it, then, you know, I need to correct this account number. You can do that, but that would reset all of that process. So it would need to be approved again after that change was made.
Okay. And then it says, what happens when you reject a wire?
So if you reject a wire, that's going to void the transaction. And then that wire would need to be started from the beginning again. So it would actually void out that transaction.
Okay. And then someone said, are these wires sent over via a batch with export data? Like, how are they going over?
So they're not sent as a batch, because we prefer that if, you know, one particular file was to fail, then everything in that fails. So we send over multiple, and then we haven't had any issues with that. So we send, you know, one file with that one wire, and then we send a second one with that second wire, so that then we know if that, you know, entire file fails, then everything within that fails. So we don't batch them.
That makes sense. Okay. And then someone says, if you click the hyperlink bank completed, what does that show?
So it just shows that the bank has completed the wire transaction.
Okay.
If there was any type of additional message that had come back, in the case where a bank had rejected or canceled a wire, you would see that information here within the notice.
Okay, and then the last one, and I promise you can move on. It says, oh, I lied. There's a couple more came in. What happens around cutoff time?
So around cutoff time, it all depends. So we continue to send the wire, and that kind of actually depends upon which bank we're working with. So some of them, they will still receive the wire even if it is after cutoff, but it will then be processed that next day. Others, we actually have to, they'll still receive it, but we have to future date it for them. So if your cutoff was, I'm just using an example, say 5:30 Eastern, and then you try to send a wire at 5:31, then that wire would actually be changed to be processed the next day, and it would be sent that way. So there is that possibility if you're that close to the wire cutoff that that could be done. But otherwise, the bank, if we send it as today, then the bank would bail that wire because it would be after cutoff. So
Okay. And someone else asked, is there a notification if a wire is held due to OFAC review?
there is not.
Okay.
Banks that we've worked with have not provided that feedback where we can get that information from them that it was, being held for that. But what you would likely see in that scenario is, something that you sent, 10 minutes ago is still staying, or 30 minutes ago is still staying in that bank accepted status, and then that would be the point to hey, why is this wire being held up, what's going on with it, start looking at it that way.
Okay. And someone asked, would you be able to retrieve the Fed reference number for tracking in case it's needed to provide for the customer?
Yep. So everyone that gets a bank completed status, we do update the details on the wire, and we record that the Fed reference number back into the transaction. So you would always have that once we get to the bank completed status.
Okay, great. Let's see. Does the date update in SoftPro as well to match the bank?
It does. So whatever the transaction date is that it gets sent with, that is the date that we would use in SoftPro as well. So if it was one of those instances where we had to future date it, you would actually see that. And we would record that change that had to future date the wire because of it was past cutoff. And the same thing would happen with a wire that was sent over a weekend, and maybe Monday's even a bank holiday, then it would be future dated to Tuesday.
Okay. And then someone said, in this process, the wire initiator would have to validate the wire instructions on the run, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And do we get any kind of email notification when a wire has been completed at the bank, similar to most of the SP360 notifications they get for other integrations?
We do not have that, no.
Okay. And that's it. Okay, you can go on.
Okay. So, that is, really the workflow for the outgoing side of it too. We touched on how to receipt in the incoming wire, how to, how you would view that information, how we pull that information from your bank, and then being able to view that information and receipt it, those incoming funds into your order or your ledger, and then being able to disperse too. So being able to initiate the wire by, first putting in that wire information with your order contact, then having that outgoing wire information from your contact flow into your transaction that you're going to be dispersing on, posting that transaction, then being able to approve it, and then being able to approve and submit it to the bank. So hopefully that provides certainly some easier workflow, keeps you within Select, don't have to go to an external bank platform in order to work with them, and certainly simplify some actions for you. I've appreciated all of your attention and your questions, but if David, if you have anything else that you want to add, otherwise.
No, I mean, the only thing I would like to add, Elliott, is really just to reiterate that, I know you mentioned sort of an install, on the server side and the client side. This is a secure connection from a customer's environment, to an integrated bank. Obviously if they're customer, and this is only available, we should have prefaced this, on the SoftPro Select platform. For those who may be on SoftPro Enterprise or SoftPro Standard Edition, this functionality was coded exclusively for the SoftPro Select application. But there is some installation needed. There is an agreement that needs to be signed. There's also fees associated with the use of this platform. It is not specific to a given bank. Like if I'm using several integrated banks, it is a fee per file or per ledger, that is charged as much as $4 a file or as little as $1.50 depending on the tier that is selected. And it's something that, if I receipt in 5 wires and initiate 4, it's one flat fee for the licensing of this platform per ledger, per order, really, per real estate matter. And so from a pricing perspective, if you have any questions concerning, the availability of your bank, once again, you can reach out to myself at david.proctor@softprocorp.com. We'll be happy to look at that. We're in conversations with quite a few banks and have been, and this has been a platform that, it's been in the works for, I think, close, Elliott, to 2 years now. But it's something that, the first phase just has a couple banks in it from a minimum release standpoint, but we'll continue to add to them, as well as, there's some banks also facilitate the delivery of positive pay. There's certain a la carte things that the banks can add as well. We've focused, today on the wire piece, but we expect to continue to iterate on this as we move forward so that, additional features and additional payment types, et cetera, may be supported through this platform as we move into later this year and next. And that's all.
All right. Thank you, David. All right. I think with that,
we'll hand it back to Leslie.
We'll hand it back to Leslie. Yes. Thank you.
Great, thank you guys so much. There was a couple questions regarding pricing, in which case I would defer you to sales, and they can kind of go over the structure and whatnot, and they can send you probably that via email, or you can call them. If you're interested in that, just email myself, sales, or David, and we can take care of that for you.
Leslie, I'm handling all the sales for this product, so the sales guys will just reach out to me, so you can skip that step and just have people reach directly out to me on this one.
Perfect. Okay, you heard it, folks. He volunteered. So if you have any questions regarding pricing or any other specifics regarding SoftPro Banking, please feel free to reach out. If we did not get to your question, you can also reach directly out to David. We tried to get through as many as we could. And if you have any more specific questions or you want a demo or further demo, just reach out to David. So Elliott, I want to say thank you for taking us through that. It looks great. I know we've been kind of waiting for it, so it's kind of fun to see it in actual action. As a reminder, we will send out a recap with a link to this, so you would be able to go back and view it or show it to anyone in your office. And of course, if you have any further questions or want a more in-depth demo on how it would work with your organization or pricing, please just reach out to david.proctor@softprocorp.com. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to our next Save USC, which should be in about 2 weeks. Thanks so much, and everyone have a great week.